I've really never been more hopeful for Rivian. It's really cool to see them achieving gross profitability in the last quarter, but also I think they've learned a lot from the R1 line of vehicles, which are obviously very difficult to turn profitable, but seeing some of the updates that RJ is posting over on Twitter, because yes, that's what it's called, really gets me excited to see how they're going to basically go mainstream with the Rivian R2. From the outside, a lot of people probably just look at it and think, oh yeah, okay, they took a Rivian R1S and they scaled it down a little bit, removed the third row, and maybe make the battery a little smaller, and poof, now you got an R2. But no, RJ has been tweeting out some updates about the R2 that are pretty impressive, and I wanted to highlight them for you over here on YouTube because I understand a lot of people don't like using Twitter. I don't even like using Twitter. It's kind of a disgusting platform, and you get recommended the weirdest stuff that you wish you could unsee, but not to worry, I'll share with you all of the most interesting stuff going on over there. So first off, in case you missed it from earlier reports, the R2 does not even have the same drive unit as the R1 products. They're using a new motor, essentially, on R2 that they're calling Maximus, whereas the R1 is using what's called enduro motors. And apparently Maximus uses continuous winding in the stator, and this reduces the total number of welds in the drive unit from 264, which is what they're currently using on the enduro motors, all the way down to just 24. Basically means the number of welds has been reduced by an order of magnitude, less than 10% the number of welds required in the drive unit, which is fantastic. And there's also been a huge emphasis on part consolidation and elimination on the drive unit as well. We can also see with the Maximus motor that they've integrated the rotor shaft and gear into a single forged component. And they've optimized the bearings on Maximus to only require 2 instead of 4 like it is on Enduro, which, in case you don't know what all of this stuff means, don't worry, I don't either. But what you need to know is it's simplifying the parts design, drastically reducing the cost of the powertrain, which is not even the largest overall component that goes into a vehicle, but it just goes to show you how little details and tiny cost-saving measures are being applied to the entire product, okay? It's not just switching from a 2170 cell battery pack to a 4695 structural battery pack. There's a lot more going on here with cost savings, and that brings me to the image you see behind me right now that I think is one of the most exciting developments. Rivian is going with Giga castings, which have been a very safe, reliable, and proven cost-cutting measure for the Tesla Model Y, currently the best-selling vehicle in the world. And you know, early on there was a lot of speculation that Giga castings would be harder to work on or repair, but highlighted by industry experts like Sandy Monroe, anytime you get some kind of structural damage in a vehicle, it's rarely going to be that cheap to work on in the first place, and that's mostly the role of Giga castings. And RJ just recently posted out these images of how they're simplifying the underbody design of the Rivian R2 and showcased how the R2 is basically using 3 major high-pressure die castings for the rear compared to the Rivian R1S, which is using about 50 body pieces. So while simultaneously he's hyping up the R2, he's kind of showcasing all of the manufacturing inefficiencies they're having with the R1S. No wonder it's so difficult for this vehicle to be produced at scale profitably. But the trick with balancing the cost of these die castings is that the stamping machinery is very, very pricey. It's quite expensive, and really the only way you're able to justify these large Giga castings is if you have extreme scale to back it up. So these components in the factory usually cost tens of millions of dollars, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars, and you really can only justify buying them if you're expecting there to be hundreds of thousands of orders coming in for the product that they are optimized for. So because Rivian feels that confident in the market demand for the R2, they're spending big money to get every ounce of cost out of the manufacturing of this vehicle so that they can hit the price targets that they've promised. But just to give you a little bit more perspective on the cost-cutting measures of these die castings, switching to just 3 casted pieces on the rear of the R2, that essentially allows them to eliminate 50 stampings and over 300 joints from the current assembly line in R1S, which is already coming close to breaking even, but there's just going to be a ton more cost-cutting measures required, of course, for the R2 because it's going to be starting at a much, much lower price, but still retain all of that Rivian character, like the software, the Rivian styling, and probably the best efficiency we've ever seen out of a Rivian vehicle, because the R2 is going to be much, much smaller, while still having a ton of practicality with storage space in the back and a decent amount of off-roading, around 9.7 inches inches of ground clearance on a coil suspension this time, by the way, not air suspension like the R1. That's just a much more costly, expensive thing to mass produce, so R2 is going for steady, reliable, affordable options when it comes to suspension. And it looks like RJ is already happily demoing that they're rolling out hands-free self-driving for pre-mapped highways on the Gen 2 vehicles right now, and as recently showcased in their recent videos, they also want to get to a point of eyes-free driving by the end of next year, which means by the time the R2 is in production, which should be around this time next year, there's probably going to be some very compelling self-driving features to go for, and with all of the controversy surrounding Elon in the White House, I think there's going to be a lot of demand for an all-electric SUV at a reasonable price, you know, sub $50,000. That's not a Tesla, and I think just that alone is probably going to flock a bunch of people towards the R2 because the software is fantastic, the self-driving's getting better every day, and there's a lot of advantages to the R2. It's supposed to be faster because they were able to fit a tri-motor system on the inside. It has more storage capacity on the inside, a powered frunk, better off-roading capability. So the Model Y is great, and I still think it's probably going to be the best seller globally, but Rivian R2 I think is probably going to be the best Model Y competitor yet, and I can't wait to see the comparison videos of people showing off the pros and cons between the two. But what do you guys think? Are you excited for the R2? Does seeing all these cost-cutting measures make you feel more bullish on the future of Rivian? Feel free to speculate along with me down in the comments below, and thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos, so thanks again. Have an excellent rest of your day.